Yesterday, we left off with Elijah doing quite an amazing thing where there was this huge action and this huge mind-bending experience where God sends fire from above, and we are very clearly obvious that God is God. And the people are obviously aware that God is and the character of God among them. And then the crash happens. If you've done significant times of probably serving God or done things where God's really used you in pretty powerful ways. God is using us, but there is a fatigue that happens at times in that. And what we see is, I can't prescribe what was happening to Elijah, but it sounds like he's going into a fatigue depression, actually, and kind of a exhaustion that happens. And we see that because he begins to run away and he begins to forget who he is. And the queen Jezebel's like, "I'm going to kill you," and he has this moment where he loses confidence and he becomes very lonely and isolated. And he actually, God says, he's so gentle. He's gentle with you and me when we're in our lower spaces, lower places. He gives him food. He gives him rest. And then he says, "Go to Mount Horeb, a 40-day journey in silence and solitude, and I'm going to talk to you." So he goes away into from this huge event and this mountaintop experience, right, with God. He moves away to this more isolated place alone with God. Again, this is the second time we see in Elijah's life. In chapter 17, he introduces him. He's actually gone on a retreat away during a drought, and God said, "I will supernaturally feed you in this time." So God is meeting him in these moments of silence and awareness, so that in these critical moments when he stands up on mountaintops and speaks, "Thus saith the Lord," it's out of the place of thus being with the Lord that he's able to have that capacity and strength. And here he is again. He's fatigued, he's worn out, and God loves him and cares for him. And then he goes to Mount Horeb. And a profound thing happens, probably intentionally contrasting this awe-inspiring experience on Mount Horeb, or on this Mount Carmel earlier with the big showdown. He goes in a cave. And as he's in a cave, you can imagine a dark cave, which could be a great symbol for where he is feeling spiritually. We find out that he is extremely lonely. And God asks this question to him. He asks us, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I wonder if God asks that question to you today. Not in an accusatory way. I think the content of how we ask that question probably tells us a lot about God. "What are you doing here, Art?" No. I think the question is meant to, what are you doing here? What brought you to this place today, where you're at, where you find yourself? It's not necessarily accusatory. I think the question actually is meant to have space in silence or even just rest to penetrate into the deeper places of us. Elijah has an ability to say that. And so, as he speaks, God answers, he responds to that question saying, "God, I'm alone. I'm tired. I feel like nobody's here with me. I just did this huge thing, but now I feel like I'm running for my life. God, come on." And God speaks to him and in his loneliness, and doesn't minimize it, but actually speaks to it. Says there's others that are there. There's 7,000 among you that haven't bent their knee. You're not alone. And actually, we find out later that he actually guides him to have a ministry partner, Elisha, very soon. But in this moment, God reveals himself in a way that expands Elijah's and maybe your and my understanding of who this God is. It wasn't in the big event, even though God was there, but God wanted him to know that he was present and with him in even a more terrifying way. He's at the face of the cave, and all of a sudden a powerful wind comes through and shakes everything, and God is not in that. The text is clear. Then an earthquake comes and shakes everything and just feels like everything's falling apart. God is not in that power display. God's not there. And then the fire comes through, and it's intentionally saying God is not there. For Elijah in those moments, he had all this big events. He's raised someone from the dead, actually. These power moments. And God's trying to make sure Elijah knows that beyond those activities and actions that God does in powerful ways, what will even terrify him more is what the Hebrew text says is a still small voice. It terrifies him even more than all those other things. God began to expand his understanding, and that question had space to grow. What are you doing here, Art? What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? I wonder if God asked that question to you gently today. What are you doing here, Art? How you might respond to that. What might the things that led you up to this moment, brought you to this time in this space, what might that be? I encourage you to go and read read 1 Kings 19 again. Read through that. Listen to the way God gently deals with them. And then let God ask that question to you. And let's see where that conversation goes. Because the one who speaks in the still small voice still speaks in the still small voice. We'll see you tomorrow.